join me in welcoming Mrs. Rosselli.
Morning, everybody.
Morning.
So, life lessons. So I've got a couple of readings to begin with. One from Luke 6:46 to 49. Why do you call me Lord, Lord, and do not do what I say? As for everyone who comes to me and hears my words and puts them into practice, I will show you what they are like. They are like a man building a house who dug down deep and laid a foundation on rock. When the flood came, the torrent struck that house but could not shake it, because it was well built. But the one who hears my words and does not put them into practice is like a man who built a house on the ground without a foundation. The moment the torrent struck that house, it collapsed and its destruction was complete. And from Chon Song-gyong, true love is to be attained through experience and understood through feeling. True love is not something that can be mastered through words, writings, or general education. It can only be attained through daily living. Adam and Eve were supposed to reach perfection by experiencing and feeling the heart of true children, the heart of true brother and sister, the heart of true husband and wife, the heart of true parents through step-by-step daily living. They would have finally become ideal people who perfected the purpose of creation. Only when they deeply learned through their experience God's true love as a whole. And from Frank Sinatra, I think the greatest ambition I have in life is to pass on to others what I know. So, yeah, I believe that we can learn something from anyone or anything. And actually, we can learn many valuable lessons in our daily lives if we keep an open mind to it, if you're prepared to learn. So, yeah, in the olden days, long time ago, they told stories, right, from one generation to the next. And those stories were kind of passed on. So, why did they tell those stories from one generation to the next? Anybody? Huh? Yeah? So, yeah, you can pass on something, you can learn from it, is another reason. I suppose in those days they didn't have paper, all right, and pens to record it down. So that was one way of keeping a record. And probably over the years it may have been kind of exaggerated, I guess, on some level. But the main point was actually that you can learn from those lessons. So, or those stories. So we can learn from stories. So in the Bible, actually Jesus told lots of stories and parables so that people could not only relate to them, but they could also learn from them. Who here likes to be constantly lectured to or told, do this, do that, or commanded, right? Or to be given sometimes like an abstract idea or a concept. It's difficult, isn't it? No one really likes to be lectured to, right? Even as little children, like do this, do that, pick up this, pick up that. We don't like that, really, right? But actually, we can all relate to a story. So, it brings actually like the concept to life. So, Jesus said in the Bible, love your neighbor as yourself, right? In one sense, that's like a commandment or, it's like a direction. But actually, okay, it's a direction, it's an abstract idea, it's like something that maybe I can take on board, maybe I can't, but he's really telling us what to do. But actually, when he puts it into a story like the Good Samaritan, it brings it to life, right? So actually, you can think about that story, and you can think, yeah, that makes sense to me, and it brings love your neighbor, as yourself, into kind of like reality. It makes sense. So yeah, actually, when you think about the Good Samaritan story, that person was not his neighbor, right? That person was not from the same race. right? That person was not from the same tribe. That person was not from the same community. That person wasn't even from the same religion. So, but you can learn from that story, right? Same in like Matthew 18. They were having an argument, right? Anyone can tell me what they're arguing about in Matthew 18? Anyone good at the Bible here? No? The disciples were having this big argument, right? Huh? Oh, Nigel, it's kind of on the tip of your tongue. What were the disciples?
What she said. Right or the left?
No. Wasn't what? Anyway, it was basically they were arguing who is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. Yeah? They were having this great big argument. And Jesus said to them, unless you change and become like little children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. So what did the disciples need to learn from that? What did they need to change? First of all, instead of like thinking like who is the greatest, they actually needed to humble themselves to be like the little child. They also needed to change their idea slightly about what the kingdom of heaven was like. Right? As long as we kind of consider our own self as the most important thing in the world, it's going to be difficult really to enter the kingdom of heaven. So Jesus was trying to teach them through this kind of story. But he was also saying that actually the child's characteristics should actually be like that of a person entering the kingdom of heaven. So what can we learn from children that maybe we've kind of, as older people, tend to lose? When I say like children, I'm talking about this age, right? What can we learn from children that when we're kind of like this big, that sometimes we no longer have or we've lost? A pure heart, right? They have a pure heart that maybe we don't have quite that pure heart as a little child. Anything else we can learn from a little child? Be playful. Okay, anything else? Kaishin, you got lots of little children. What can you learn from them? Curiosity, right? Okay, they're curious, right? And anything else? Honesty, right? Children have complete honesty, right? You ask them and they will just tell you, right? So they have something that we don't have anymore. What else do children have? Trust. Children will trust you at that age unconditionally. I remember used to put my children on a really like tall tower and say, jump, right? And they would jump because they trusted that I would catch them. Not that I'm like, sucker, like that, So they had trust, right, that I would catch them, right? Anything else children have that we don't have? Unconditional love? Innocence. Yes, children have an innocence, right, that maybe we don't have anymore, right? Okay. They also have a wonderment about them, maybe the same as curiosity. They're dependent on those who love and care for them, right? They're humble, right? There's an innocence in children. And actually, they can kind of forgive and forget, right? If something happens to them, they don't hold it, maybe necessarily. Although sometimes I do wonder, one time when when my children were very young, I drove them up to Wales, and we got there about midnight, and I kind of got them into the house, and I kind of put them into bed, and then I went to bed, and then about 3 o'clock in the morning, I heard the doorbell ringing in my dad's house, and I thought, that's really weird. Who would be ringing the doorbell at 3 o'clock in the morning? It's just weird. And I thought, oh gosh, anyway, I went downstairs, and one of my children, I won't say which, was on the other side of the door. And her face was against the window, because you've got a kind of this big window. I was like, what are you doing outside at 3 o'clock in the morning? And I went to open the door, and it was locked. And then I realized, actually, I'd left the child in the car. And they've been sleeping in the back, right? And I put the others into bed. And then I'd locked the door and everything. We got to bed. And I was kind of so mad with the child. But then I realized actually it was my fault, because I left the child in the car. And on one level, they still remember even though they were that young. So I'm not sure they always forgive and forget. Anyway, they still remind me of it. Anyway, maybe they forgive, maybe they forgot, but they still remind me of it. So yeah, we can learn also from Father's words, can't we? Right? So Father, gave us lots of words. We can learn from those. We can learn from the principle, right? We can learn from testimonies, each other's testimonies, right? When someone had some kind of experience, that's not really just for that person, but actually we can share it, and then I can learn from that experience as well. So we can learn from stories. We can learn now from stories on the newspaper, things we hear on the radio. We can learn from TED Talks or YouTube or whatever. We can learn everywhere, right? And we can, we can learn something from anyone. Even we can learn from the worst person in the world. What can we learn from the worst person in the world? Yeah, not to be like that person, right? So same with sermons, right? If it's a really, really boring sermon, right, or a terrible sermon, and then you have to give one next week, you can think, well, I can learn from that person, not how to give a sermon, like that, right? So there's always things that you can learn from, right? You can learn from, we can learn from the music, right, and the songs, right, the words in that music, or poems, like Nigel, you like poems, right? We can learn from those poems. So I have a story for you. It's about a man who was asked to paint a boat. So he brought his paint and his brushes and began to paint the boat a bright red, as the owner had asked him. While painting, he noticed a small hole in the hull, which is like the bottom of the boat, and he quietly repaired it. When he finished painting, he received his money and he left. The next day, the owner of the boat came to the painter and presented him with a nice check, much higher than the payment for the painting of the boat. The painter was surprised and said, "But you already paid me for painting of the boat, sir." "But this is not for the paint job," he said. "It's for repairing the hole in the boat." But he said that was such a small thing, certainly not worth paying me such a high amount for something so insignificant. "My dear friend, you do not understand. Let me tell you what happened. When I asked you to paint the boat, I forgot to mention to you about the hole. When the boat dried, my kids took the boat out and went out on a fishing trip. They did not know that there was a hole in the boat, and I was not at home at the time. So when I returned home and I noticed that they had taken the boat, I became desperate and frantic because I remembered the boat had had a hole. Imagine my relief and joy when I saw them returning from the fishing trip. Then I examined the boat and I found that you had repaired the hole. You see, what you did, you saved the life of my children. So I do not have enough money to pay you for your small good deed. So no matter who, when, or how, continue to help sustain, wipe tears, listen attentively, and carefully repair all the leaks that you find. You never know when one is in need of us, or when God holds a pleasant surprise for us to be helpful and important to someone, somewhere. Along the way, you may have repaired many numerous boat holes for several people without realizing how many lives you saved. So make a difference, be the best you, and make a huge difference by your small actions. So yeah, sometimes in life, we can do a small thing, which might be small to us, but actually it's huge to somebody else. And actually, like I say, I look at it and, it's difficult to change the world, but we can do small things to make the world a better place. We can leave the plus. We can go the extra mile. If we see a problem, don't walk past. Fix it, right, okay? So, question for you. Does anybody know who that person is sitting in the middle there? No, not Lord Montgomery. Good guess, but not Lord Montgomery. No, not General Haig, right? No, not really as famous as those guys.
Mr. Rosselli?
No, it's not Mr. Rosselli. I did do cadet. Oh, that's a more recent picture of him, or probably something that you might recognize more. Yeah. Tom? No, he had a... Captain Tom. Yeah, Captain Tom, right? Okay? If you don't recognize him there, you recognize him there, right? Okay? Yeah. Who does not recognize that person? Put your hand in the air. One person does not recognize that person. Right, okay. So, anyway, basically, he made a huge difference by a small action, right? Was he a great person from the beginning of his life? Well, we're all kind of great people from the beginning of our life in that sense, aren't we? So, how many of you had heard of him 5 years ago? Nobody, right, in this room. Nobody heard of him 5 years ago. He was just kind of a humble guy, right? He fought the war in India, and actually he was involved in the Burma conflict, and he rose up the ranks. He became a captain. After the war, he started a construction company, and then that was his life, basically. But then during the pandemic, he was like 99, and then 100 days before his birthday, he decided, I'm going to walk 100 laps of my garden. And how much... He did that because he wanted to raise money for the NHS as a way of saying, like, thank you to them. How much was he hoping to raise? £1,000, right? That was his goal, right? So he started, but somehow what he was doing captured the public's imagination, right? And actually he went on to raise how much? 38 million, but with gift aid and things like that, over 40 million, right? And then he had to turn it off, right? Because it was just like too much. So not only did he do so much by, in one sense, a small action, but he also inspired a whole lot of other people to do something, right? So I remember watching on YouTube some granny climbing up her stairs, you know, because she was going to climb Everest. And every time she went up her stairs, it was like another 15 feet up Everest. And she was determined to climb Everest before she died. So she made, you know, he affected a whole lot of people, right? And he made them think also, right? By just his small actions. And actually, I went out and I bought his life lessons, which is basically what this is titled on. I'm just going to read from the prologue of his life lessons. He's 99. No, he's 100 when he wrote this. So every morning, I open my century-old eyes to another day of life. I lie in bed and allow my body to catch up with my mind. Once I'm fully awake, I swivel my head on my pillow and check the time, hoping that it's past 6 o'clock, but knowing it's more likely to be nearer 4 o'clock. Much to my dismay, I've never been a good sleeper, and a decent night's rest has become something of a luxury. No matter what the hour, I remain there for a while, and I ask myself, how am I going to feel today? I wriggle my fingers and my toes and wait for each muscle to respond. Some are stiff, others not so much. Lying very still, I can feel my heart pounding inside its bony chassis. It's a miracle to me that this old fuel pump has been ticking since 1920. Thanks to its unfaltering perseverance, yet another day has dawned that I've never seen before. It's certainly one that I will never see again. This fact alone is enough to confirm to me that today will be a good day. Delighted by this thought, I swivel my legs out of bed and pull myself upright into an upright position. Everything is done at snail's pace. I sit for a time and let my system warm up. I'm not as steady on my feet as I used to be, so I have to wait a bit before shifting into first gear. Bending forward with care, I place my slippers on my size 11 feet and sit back to allow the delicate mechanism to settle. The human body is much like an engine, and you have to treat it with a certain amount of respect, especially when it's a vintage model. He's 100, but how many of you already feel like that? You know, already it's like, my dad also, if I'm at home, his radio is on at 4 o'clock in the morning because he wakes up, right? And he listens to the news and then he'll kind of fall back to sleep again. But he's he's like 90 now. But anyway, I can relate to this, even at my age. So taking things slowly, I wash, I dress and shave before going downstairs to make myself a cup of tea. My entire morning ritual takes me roughly an hour and has rarely changed in many years. But there's no hurry. I'm not on a time trial. After all, patience is something I've acquired a great deal of lately. Once I've shifted through the morning mail, I settle to the newspapers and read cover to cover, paying special attention to the obituaries, which the contents alone can rescue a day. Other people's lives are usually much more interesting than my own. Making a mental note of the ages, I must admit, however, to allowing myself a small smile if I've managed to outlive them. At my age, anything is worth celebrating. My dad's the same. He reads the obituaries and he goes, oh, I knew him, I've outlasted him. Something to celebrate. Despite my physical limitations, I still greet every morning grateful to be alive. My grandchildren assure me that even with people living longer these days, it's still pretty rare to be as old as I am, which they calculate as 100.5. They started measuring my life in half years, as anything longer might be too optimistic. It might be quarterly soon. This makes me laugh, but it reminds me of when children used to declare that they were 5.5 or 6.5 to appear a tiny little bit older. There's small merit in doing that now, but I enjoy the idea of coming full circle. So no matter how many years or half years I have spent on earth, the one thing I've learned that it's important today to start each day positively and with gratitude. So anyway, he has like 10 life lessons in there, and these are some of them. One of them was to start your day on a full stomach, right? Have a good breakfast and to carry you through the day. The world is your oyster. It's actually what you make of it, right? It's your life. You can do anything. Be comfortable in your own skin, right? If you're not comfortable in it, obviously it's going to be an issue, right? Keep smiling whatever comes your way, right? As Tim says, life is suffering, right? But you've got to keep smiling. Walk in someone else's shoes, right? If you really want to understand someone else, right? Walk in their shoes. Keep an open mind is a good thing. Fortune favors the brave. Have hope in your heart. I think it's important to have hope, isn't it? Right? Without hope, actually, it's very, very difficult, life. Find your purpose. That's also really important. If you don't find your purpose, it's like setting off sailing, but with no direction, right? Where are you trying to get to? You need to find where you want to go before you set off. So you need to find your purpose. And then also, you'll never walk alone. Anyway, I just want to read a tiny bit from that section of You'll Never Walk Alone. If I can find it. So, my wife Pamela and her best friend Janet were never happier when they were out shopping together. Sometimes they'd meet up with other friends for lunch. And when Pam got home, she'd unpack her bags, make some tea, pick up the telephone call to Janet before spending the next 2 hours chatting about their day. She was often so long on that phone that when she finished the call, she complained that her arm ached from holding the receiver to her ear. I simply could not understand that. What on earth could there be to say? I couldn't talk for 2 hours about anything, least of all after I spent the whole day with that person. It was a complete mystery to me, but it happens so often that I believe women are much better at friendship than men. By contrast, I've always been a bit of a loner, who never sought the distraction of noise and chatter. I didn't once feel that I needed the company of a friend, perhaps because I was so self-contained, no one was calling me up or knocking on my door day after day. He then talks about his time in the army and about comradeship, right? And the friends he built, in the war and things like that. But he says, I've really enjoyed the company of those felonry military veterans with whom I've made a unique bond and kept in touch. The reunions I first instigated for the Duke of Wellington's regiment went on for 65 years, which might even qualify me for another Guinness World Record. Our annual gatherings were almost tribal as we caught up with each other's fortunes and renewed connections that had been forged in the heat of the jungle. Although our members fell away one by one until I was the only man standing. But all the time, we bolstered each other through the wind and the rain. Each year, when we met up for our catch-up, we'd privately note how others had aged or how much thinner, frailer, or shrunken they looked. We looked on as dementia crept into once brilliant minds, making those starry-eyed soldiers quieter, or how arthritis and disease started to bend them double and make them doddery, myself included. Some of the men got themselves into a rut, physically and emotionally, due to a bereavement or a lack of purpose, illness, or general unhappiness. And several stopped coming at all. Many had only two topics of conversation, the weather and their health, and with fierce competition between them who had suffered the most. Nevertheless, we supported each other as best we could, and our sense of comradeship only deepened. For those of us with a more positive outlook, these nostalgic trips down memory lane were truly a force for good. I attended so many funerals that name after name was crossed out in my address book, each one a colourful memory. The circle of comradeship that I'd enjoyed for so many years shrank away. With none left who shared my history, I had no one to reminisce with about my years in India and Burma, or even to confirm that it had ever happened. Moving in with my daughter and Hannah and her family, Pamela, after Pamela died, wasn't an easy decision I took lightly. But it was one of the best decisions I made. This unexpected blessing has never been brought home to me more than when I think of the homeless or the disenfranchised, those who are totally alone with nobody to help or protect them. That was never surely the intention when they were born. There are plenty of others who are isolated because of their disability, their poverty, their mental health, or with little human contact or chance of reconciliation with their families. That's why it's important that we look after one another from the beginning to the end. Thankfully, both at home and across this wonderful country of ours, I feel surrounded by people encouraging me to take another step, and another, and then another. Each step starts where the other one finishes and leads to the next. And it's all the more special if you have someone beside you to help catch you if you fall. So we should also be grateful that in one sense we're not walking alone, right? Let me go back to this. I don't know where it's gone. Right, okay. So, we're not walking alone. You have, closest to you, obviously, you have your family, right? And they will always be beside you. But you have your community. You have each other. But most importantly, we've got God by our side, right? And if you've been through one difficulty or one suffering, right, and you've come out the other side, then actually you can use that lesson or that experience to help you when you face your next difficulty or your next challenge. So who remembers this one here? Who sold that one? A few of you, right? I had laser prints, right, in America. And actually that used to be one of my favorite ones, right? And if you don't know it, it's about a person walking across a beach, and he talks about there's two sets of footprints, one of him and one of the Lord. And he said, "Oh, Lord, in my difficult times in life, you left me. Why?" And the Lord replied, "I didn't leave you, I carried you," right? So basically, God is with us So we will never walk alone. So lessons, life lessons, they're important, but in one sense they're meaningless if you don't put them into practice, right? It's no good hearing a story or, going through an experience if you don't actually change or put that into practice, right? So yeah, when we read in the Bible, or we read Jesus' words or Father's words, actually we need to put those words into practice, right? And they need to become our life lessons. And then actually from that we change and we grow. I'll just show you, finish with this. I'll give you time to read each one, hopefully. So yeah, for me, as Captain Tom said, start the day positively and have gratitude. We can always find gratitude in our lives, wherever we go, whatever we do. And actually, about 6 months ago, my back collapsed. I had I had an annular tear, right? Which means, I don't know, something between the discs tore, and then anyway, I ended up in an ambulance, and basically, I couldn't walk. I spent 6 hours in this school, and they had to take me out in an ambulance. And yeah, it's still difficult. 6 months later, actually, 6 months later, it's still there. I wake up, the first thing I wake up in the morning, and I think of my back. The last thing at night, I go to bed, I think of my back. Throughout the day, I think about my back. It's always pain. And sometimes they say, you talk to people and they say, well, it can take up to 2 years, right, to fix an annular tear. And what can you do about it? Well, just exercise, right? There's not really any solutions. But then I think, anyway, I can walk, right? It's not terminal, right? In one sense, I got a call the other day, and I've got my first physiotherapy appointment next week, 6 months. After it happened, 6 months, I get my first physiotherapy appointment. Anyway, I can think, well, I'm grateful that we've got an NHS, I suppose, right? And anyway, when you look around what's happening in the world today, especially in Russia and Ukraine, we have so much to be grateful for. Really, really, really. And, anyway, if we can help in some way, I think there was a drive here yesterday with this lady with a truck and things like that, and there's things on Facebook or whatever, or through prayers, then let's try and just do small actions, hopefully can make a big difference. So please join me in prayer. Dear Heavenly Parent, thank you so much for being here together with us today. Sometimes we really don't know that when we do something small, how much it can affect other people. But actually, most importantly, we want to learn from you. We want to learn from each other. We want to learn from everyone, words, stories in the Bible. But also we want to try to make a difference. Maybe it's a small difference, but it could make a big difference to somebody else. Please be with us throughout this week. Let us try to put lessons that we learn into practice and to become better people and to make the world a better place. Above all, let us really pray for peace, and especially for everyone that's involved in caught up in conflicts around the world, especially what we see in the daily news. That's what's happening in Ukraine at the moment. Please be with all of them, and that we can try to support them in some small way. I thank you for this time. I offer report this prayer in my name, Simon Rosselli of a Blessed Central Family. Adieu.